fun එක next level කරන dialogue fan blaster.
Tonight, on First at 9 this Thursday the 19th of December 2024. Tentative diplomacy. Sri Lanka to maintain balanced diplomatic ties with both India and China. Chinese vessels will only be allowed in Sri Lankan waters after conducting due diligence, assures the cabinet spokesman. Cabinet decisions. Sri Lanka to import salt for the first time in over 1.5 decades. 2 MOUs to be signed with India for digital expertise and financial grants. Stick to the plan. Government cannot afford to deviate from the IMF program, emphasizes the former president. Says opposition's criticisms must be based on the IMF framework. Innovation and development. Sri Lanka to establish a central mechanism to regulate research projects. Research and development efforts must contribute towards development goals, says advisor to the president.
Chilo Dairy, Sri Lankawama Kiren Perata. Obe Vishwasi dinu Censurine, then Langamati pharmacy in Labagata Hacker.
Kanta parisang karagatot? Api parisang.
Asian Paints Causeway Aquasafe. Vesat Mattuig Gadarat Disney.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Sri Lanka's premier primetime English news bulletin, Derana First at 9. I'm Tarnidu Mahendra, joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and from around the world. In your top story this evening, Cabinet spokesman Minister Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa stated that Sri Lanka is engaging with India and China diplomatically with a long-term bilateral vision for both countries. During the cabinet briefing today, responding to a question regarding China's interest in renewing maritime research in Sri Lankan waters, the cabinet spokesman said Sri Lanka will allow research vessels to enter after inquiries are conducted regarding the purpose of the visit and contingent on clearance from the National Security Council.
ඔබතුමා සඳහන් කළා ජනාධිපති අරමුදල සම්බන්ධයෙන් මොන ක්‍රමවේදය යටතේද මොවුන්ට අසීමිත ආකාරයට නිකුත් කරලා තියෙන්නේ ඔබ සඳහන් කළ පුද්ගලයන්ට අමතරව තවත් මේ ඉන්නව නේද
ඥාන වර්ධනයට උදව් කරන්න
Funds from the President's Fund can be released only for specific purposes, such as the advancement of knowledge, the relief of poverty, and under its last category, for other purposes as deemed appropriate by the board overseeing the fund. Funds have been released under this final category. I have only presented the list of politicians who obtained funds between 2005 and 2024. However, funds have also been issued during the tenure of former President Chandrika Bandaranayake Kumaratunga. In addition to the individuals I have mentioned, several local government representatives and officials have also received funds from the President's Fund. This raises ethical concerns and investigations are currently underway. More documents need to be retrieved from the President's Fund and the Presidential Secretariat to uncover further details. I expect to release additional documents in the coming days.
What
is the government stance on the foreign research vessels? Right. India has raised concern during the president's meeting. Right. Yesterday, Chinese CPC party member has clearly said they want to resume Chinese research vessels in Sri Lankan water for maritime research.
So we are dealing with these two countries in a very diplomatic manner. We are very open. You know that on 21st to 28th, medical ship with 200 crew coming to Sri Lanka and they are supporting our health system. It is a Chinese vessel, so we don't have any obligation to that. Whenever the research vessels comes, we can study, we can investigate it and we can negotiate with the relevant parties. We are working with a very long-term diplomatic vision.
Is the one-year ban now relaxed?
We are considering the matter one by one. We'll see what's the purpose. We can see the purpose and we can take the assurance from the Security Council. We are dealing those issues in relevant time and one by one.
The update on Arugambe investigation?
Situation is almost settled. There's no issue there, no security threat. Now the foreigners are coming there. The CID is investigating about these people and this incident. We will reveal the details whenever necessary.
පුද්ගලිකාංශයට සහල් ආනයනයට පැනවූ සීමා කාලය දීර්ඝ කරලා තියෙනවා.
මේ වන විට මෙට්‍රික් ටොන් 22000.
We have already imported 22,000 metric tons and we expect an additional 10,000 metric tons to arrive today. The government is prepared to adjust the deadline based on future necessities as they arise. We also have Sri Lankan citizens in various countries including Myanmar, Ukraine and Israel who requires repatriation. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Foreign Employment Bureau are working on this matter. I would like to highlight that some parties are engaging in fraudulent activities, collecting money with false promises of repatriation. Please do not fall victim to these schemes. If you have any issues, directly contact the government authorities for assistance.
උපයන විට බදු අඩු කරනවා කියලා ඊයේ ජනාධිපතිතුමා ප්‍රකාශ කළා. අඩු වෙන කාණ්ඩ කොහොමද වෙන් කරලා තියෙන්නේ?
අපේ බලාපොරොත්තුව තිබෙන්නේ මේක ලක්ෂ 2 දක්වා වැඩි කරන්න.
Our aim is to increase the payee tax threshold to 200,000 rupees. However, as this is not feasible at present, we have raised it to 150,000 rupees. We are currently exploring ways to offset the revenue loss that the state will incur due to this adjustment. These amendments are designed to ensure state revenue remains at 15% of GDP. The amendment to the payee tax is necessary as many professionals are leaving the country. Each tax bracket will receive relief ranging between 25% and 74%.
කැටගරි එකටම 74 ඉඳලා 125 දක්වා සහන ප්‍රමාණයක් ලැබෙනවා.
පිරිපුන් ජීවිතයකට ඔබ සමගින් පෙරට Union Assurance.
Welcome to Cinnamon Life, South Asia's biggest entertainment hub, where awe awaits.
චන්දුරුසුමේ කාගෙත් මන අපේ සිග TV සඳහා සුපිරි ඩීල්.
Sadaharita Plantations Limited, celebrating 22 years of your trust.
Aspirations Education, a pioneer in overseas education. Meet our experts at top destinations worldwide. Your trusted and caring partner in overseas education.
Meanwhile, government has decided to import 30,000 metric tons of salt, which will be issued to the local market by January next year in a bid to address potential salt shortages that may arise due to adverse weather. This is the first time in 15 years that salt is being imported to Sri Lanka. Additionally, it has been decided to sign 2 memoranda of understanding with the Indian government, one to leverage India's technological expertise for Sri Lanka's digitalization efforts and the other to secure a 300 million rupee grant to provide vehicles for the police department. And with that, let's review other cabinet decisions made during the week. The Cabinet of Ministers has approved the importation of up to 30,000 metric tons of raw non-iodized salt. This importation is intended to address potential salt shortages in 2025 due to adverse weather conditions. The salt will be processed and supplied to the local market by the 31st of January 2025. Meanwhile, government will appoint an official committee headed by the Secretary to the Prime Minister to conduct a review and submit a report with recommendations on non-commercial government entities. 86 departments, 25 district secretariats, 339 divisional secretariats, 340 government-owned enterprises and 115 non-commercial state statutory institutions are currently operational, with a budget of 140 billion rupees being allocated for 2024 to support these institutions. A review of non-commercial government entities has become necessary due to issues such as outdated structures, insufficient powers, inefficiencies and the overlap of tasks performed by the private sector. In another decision, approval has been given to sign a memorandum of understanding between the Ministry of Digital Economy and India's Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, aimed at promoting cooperation for capacity building and the implementation of digital solutions. The decision comes as Sri Lanka seeks to leverage India's expertise in e-governance, financial technology, artificial intelligence and digital infrastructure to support the nation's digital transformation. It has also been decided to enter into a MOU between Sri Lanka and India for a financial grant of 300 million rupees to fulfill the vehicle requirements for the Sri Lanka police. The grant will be used to supply vehicles for police duties in the northern province. Meanwhile, the daily breakfast allocation for preschool children, particularly those who are underweight, is to be increased from 60 to 100 rupees per child. The increased allocation will support approximately 155,000 children in 2025. Since 2020, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka has issued directives under the Foreign Exchange Act to protect the country's foreign exchange reserves. With the current directive set to expire in December 2024, the Central Bank has proposed issuing new directives to extend certain restrictions and relax others. The new directives will be effective from tomorrow, the 20th of December, and will extend certain capital flow restrictions and relaxations until June next year. Meanwhile, the Cabinet of Ministers has decided not to implement the decision to revise the Special Commodity Levy Act and to maintain the current Special Commodity Levy rates effective from the 1st of January 2025. This decision follows the consideration of potential adverse effects on the government's policy of supporting local farmers and the impact of applying other taxes on the importation of goods, particularly regarding essential food items. The ministers have also approved the extension of the compulsory retirement age for government medical officers from 60 years to 63 years, with amendments to be made in line with the Pensions Act. This extension applies to specialist doctors, all grades of medical officers, specialist dental surgeons, all dental surgeons, all medical officers in the medical administrative grade, and all government registered medical officers. The state-run Ceylon Electricity Board has signed an agreement to secure a $150 million loan facility from the Asian Development Bank to enhance the reliability and stability of the grid. The CEB stated that these funds will be used to implement several key projects outlined in its long-term transmission plan for 2025 through 2027. The financing is expected to support the construction of 6 new grid substations, the development of 87 kilometers of 132 kilovolt transmission lines, the construction of 45 kilometers of 220 kilovolt transmission lines, and the augmentation of 2 existing grid substations. The CEB added that the transmission assets built with this loan will facilitate the integration of planned large-scale renewable energy projects into the national grid.
Fast-track your career from O-levels with eSoft.
Diabetesol සීනි වලින් පරිස්සම් වන ඔබට අමතක නොවන පෝෂණය.
Prime Group ලංකාවේ ප්‍රථම වතාවට හඳුන්වා දෙන land leasing ලේසියෙන් මීටමක්.
Single 1111 up to 60% off from the 11th November to the 17th of November.
Kalani wire කිසි ගින්නක් නැහැ.
කිසි ගින්නක් නැහැ. Kalani Fire Shield Wire.
Apico Meal sama-sama sapata nidiyan Apico Springs form mattress Madili Rasakin.
Former President Ranil Wickremesinghe is of the view that the incumbent government must continue to adhere to Sri Lanka's International Monetary Fund supported program and called on the opposition to base their criticisms of the government within the framework of the IMF agreement. Meanwhile, the former president responded to the statements recently made in Parliament regarding his security expenses and the issuance of funds from the President's Fund during his tenure.
Presently, our economic growth rate has reached 5%. Since the country's gross domestic product increased, government has received some of it as tax revenue. We were able to do all this within the framework of the agreement with the International Monetary Fund. Therefore, it is necessary to continue that agreement. On the 20th of December, government will issue new international bond coupons. Once all those activities are complete, all we have to do now is issue the declaration that we have exited bankruptcy. After that, the banks will also implement the necessary relief measures. At the same time, we need to provide relief to the people as permitted by the circumstances. More relief can be granted once the economy strengthens further. The government should remain in the IMF program. There is no way out of this. When criticizing the government, I advise the opposition that it is useless to criticize in vain. I accept that it is the opposition's role to criticize. However, I would like to remind you that your criticisms must be based within the framework of the IMF agreement.
IMF ගිවිසුම රාමුව ඇතුලේ කියලා මතක් කරන්නට කැමතියි.
In the meantime, former President Wickremesinghe responded to the controversial remarks made by Minister Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa in Parliament regarding the issuance of funds from the President's Fund during the previous government's tenure. Issuing a statement, the former President said 1.5 billion rupees was spent on the payments for all applications that were outstanding by the end of 2022. In 2023, 839 million rupees were spent as medical aid for patients and roughly 450 million rupees were allocated for the same purpose this year as of September. The former president also mentioned that despite various requests made personally by public representatives, no financial assistance exceeding 1 million rupees was granted from the president's fund except on one occasion. Further, former President Wickremesinghe stated that as of the 31st of July 2022, the balance of the president's fund was 7 billion rupees and added that despite various payments, he had managed to maintain a balance exceeding 11 billion rupees as of the 21st of September 2024. Meanwhile, former President Wickremesinghe also stated that the statements claiming that government spent 82 million rupees for his security expenses during the last 11 months are false. A delegation led by Councillor of the International Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, Yuan Ruidong, met with Secretary to the Prime Minister Pradeep Saputantara last evening to discuss cooperation in areas of mutual benefit to enhance human capital development and economic growth. The meeting followed the Chinese delegation's discussion with General Secretary of the JVP, Tilvin Silva, earlier yesterday. The Prime Minister's office said during the discussion potential areas for future collaboration between the Sri Lankan and Chinese governments were discussed under the framework of the Silk Road Village-to-Village Initiative and the China-Singapore Connectivity Initiatives. The talks also explored a potential increase in vocational education and training programs for Sri Lankans, collaboration on developing and improving digital infrastructure in Sri Lanka, and fostering partnerships between Chinese and Sri Lankan vocational training institutes. Senior Advisor to the President on Science and Technology, Professor Gomika Udugamasuriya says in future all of Sri Lanka's research undertakings will be interconnected and regulated through a centralized mechanism. Speaking at an event aimed at raising awareness of government's policy on science, Professor Udugamasuriya highlighted that the findings of such research efforts must contribute towards Sri Lanka's development goals. Gomika Udugamasuriya, who is affiliated with the University of Houston and the MD Anderson Cancer Research Center in the United States, was recently appointed as the President's Senior Advisor on Science and Technology. An event was held in Colombo today with Professor Udugamasuriya's participation to raise awareness of government's policy on science.
Sri Lanka has a myriad of research institutions and Sri Lankan researchers are conducting research to the best of their abilities. However, these research efforts are not interconnected and their findings are not contributing towards the economy. Before undertaking research projects, we must first identify what the country's necessities are. Research should be regulated through a centralized mechanism and its findings should be contribute towards the economy and human development. We intend to accomplish 3 goals through innovation and invention. The first is economic development, the second is human and societal development, and the third is conserving the environment and creating sustainable living conditions for all.
Minister of Health and Mass Media Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa says government will not use state media as a tool to protect its image. He made this statement while addressing the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation's 99th anniversary commemoration. Meanwhile, speaking at the 69th anniversary convention of the Sri Lanka Press Association, Deputy Minister of Health and Mass Media Dr. Hansaka Wijayamuni assured that government is committed to protecting the rights of journalists. The Sri Lanka Press Association recently held its 69th anniversary convention at the Sri Lanka Foundation Institute Auditorium in Colombo. During the DF Kariyakaravana Memorial Journalism Awards that were held in conjunction with the anniversary convention, 10 veteran media personalities were honoured for their yeoman service to the field of journalism. The event was attended by Deputy Minister of Health and Mass Media Dr. Hansaka Wijayamuni.
මාධ්‍යවේදීන් විදිහට ඔවුන්ට තියෙන අභියෝග සම්බන්ධ වූ යම් වැටහීමක් රජයේ විදිහට අපිට තියෙනවා.
As a government, we have an understanding of the challenges faced by journalists. We have identified obstacles they face in acquiring professional skills as well as issues regarding the rights of journalists. Further, Sri Lanka has an issue of capital being used to unfairly take over the media landscape. As a government, we intend to continue the dialogue in this regard and contribute our utmost to resolving these issues. Government will never use state media to further our agendas.
Meanwhile, the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation celebrated its 99th anniversary with a commemorative stamp being issued to mark the occasion. The event was attended by Minister of Health and Mass Media Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa.
I came to several state media institutions as a coordinator for the President. What I requested during those visits was that they refrain from aggrandizing us. I had to make that request because in the past, that was what was usually being done when there was a change of government or when a new president was elected. As the Minister of Mass Media, my intention is to position the ministry in its proper place. In the past, every ministry except the Ministry of Mass Media acted as if they were in control of the media. However, it is the Ministry of Mass Media as the institution charged with government's communications that can guide and be an example to all media institutions. However, in doing so, state media institutions should not become tools of the government but should remain as citizens' media outlets. Instead of being used to protect government's image, they should cater to citizens' demands and uplift them.
Leader of Sarva Jana Bale MP Dilip Jayawira says Sri Lanka must not allow the civility of its society to slip through its grasp as the country moves forward. Meanwhile, several other politicians criticised the government's decisions regarding the withdrawal of security for former presidents and the amendments to the pay and withholding taxes.
බටහිර හෝ අපේ කලාපයේ වෙනත් රටවල් වලට වඩා මාතෘත්වය සමරන
Sri Lanka is a blessed nation that celebrates matriarchy and upholds these values more than Western countries or any other nations in the region. We should never allow the civility of our nation to slip from our grasp.
මේ පින්බිම එහි සભ્યත්වයේ අපින් ගිලිහි යෑමට ඉඩ නොදිය යුතුයි.
The government stated that the cost for the military security provided to former President Mahinda Rajapaksa is 610 million rupees. This amount covers the salaries of the officials involved. There will be no savings simply by sending them back to the camp.
This is yet another questionable decision by the government. Due to the prevailing peaceful conditions, there are no significant duties for military personnel. However, the police still have responsibilities such as crime prevention, narcotics control, traffic management and more. A possible solution would be to assign VIP security to the military and release police personnel for their regular duties.
Currently, when banks pay interest on fixed deposits, there is a 5% withholding tax. This has now been increased to 10%. For example, if a person has a fixed deposit of 10 million and earns an interest of 80,000 at an 8% rate, the previous 5% withholding tax would reduce the amount by 4,000. Under the new rate, according to the President's statement, this reduction will now be 8,000.
The public will soon realize whether there has been an actual reduction in the payee tax when salaries are received at the end of the month or if the money has been diverted elsewhere. As I have mentioned, the government seems to believe that whatever decisions they make is correct and we will continue to observe the outcome.
The Department of Census and Statistics announced that it has completed the final phase of this year's population and housing census. The final phase of the data collection process was completed yesterday, with yesterday's data collection focusing on displaced people. The department's Director General Anuja Seneviratne announced that the completion of this phase marks the conclusion of the 2024 census activities. However, the next 5 days will be allocated for updating and finalizing the collected data. The nationwide census began on the 7th of October with the target of gathering comprehensive information on individuals and housing. The department has urged households that have not been visited by census officers to report their situation by contacting the hotline 1901. The Director General further confirmed that a preliminary report on the census findings will be released within a month following the conclusion of the data updating process. The Sri Lanka Navy stated that 100 refugees from Myanmar reached Sri Lanka from the shores of Mullawaikal area in Mullaitivu today. The refugees were reportedly being illegally transported from Myanmar to another country in a multi-day vessel. The vessel made landfall in the Mullawaikal coast due to the shortage of food and water. Security authorities confirmed that the Sri Lanka Navy is providing food and water to the refugees and that the future course of action with regard to the refugees is being reviewed. Meanwhile, the police revealed that nearly 25 children were present among the refugees on board the vessel. Welcome back. In business news, the Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing for November 2024 slowed down to 53.3 from 58.1 in the previous month. However, the central bank in its Purchasing Managers report said the new orders sub-index expanded during the month, primarily driven by the textile and wearing apparel sector. The services PMI indicated a slow expansion in service activities in November 2024 as reflected by the Business Activity Index, which recorded a value of 60.5. The continued expansion in business activities was driven by the improvements observed across most of the sectors. New businesses increased in November due to considerable expansions in the financial services and accommodation, food and beverage activities. The Colombo Bourse today witnessed heightened volatility driven by mixed sentiment and increased market activity. The S&P SL20 index dipped during this session primarily due to price declines in the banking sector and blue chip stocks. Lanka Milk Food experienced increased trading activity with a significant volume of shares traded, largely driven by recent tax reduction and a possible boost to disposable incomes. Amidst increased participation from retail investors, the ASBI closed the day in green at 14,654, gaining 40 points from the previous day. Turnover stood at 5.9 billion rupees, marking an increase of 24.5% from the monthly average. Moreover, the food, beverage and tobacco sector led the turnover by 20%, followed by the capital goods and materials sectors, jointly contributing 30% of overall turnover. A net foreign outflow of 1.5 million was recorded. And with that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining and have a good night.